There comes a time in life when everything seems to fall away. Friends drift, opportunities vanish, and the once familiar world feels distant. You may wonder, why is this happening? But consider this. Before God bestows extraordinary blessings, He first leads you into isolation. Not as a punishment, but as preparation. In solitude, the noise of the world fades, and something deeper emerges, the voice of God, the whisper of transformation. Most people resist this silence, fearing the emptiness. But what if this emptiness is not the absence of something, but the presence of something greater unfolding? What if isolation is the cocoon before your wings? God isolates you for a reason, because something incredible is coming. But first you must be still enough to receive it. There comes a time in life when everything seems to fall away. Friends drift, opportunities vanish, and the once familiar world feels distant. You may wonder, why is this happening? But consider this. Before God bestows extraordinary blessings, He first leads you into isolation, not as a punishment, but as preparation. In solitude, the noise of the world fades, and something deeper emerges, the voice of God, the whisper of transformation. Most people resist this silence, fearing the emptiness. But what if this emptiness is not the absence of something, but the presence of something greater unfolding? What if isolation is the cocoon before your wings? God isolates you for a reason, because something incredible is coming, but first you must be still enough to receive it. Imagine a sculptor working with stone. Before he creates a masterpiece, he must first strip away the excess, carving and chiseling with precise intention. The process is uncomfortable, even painful. The stone does not understand why it is being broken, yet it is in this breaking that beauty is revealed. In the same way, God isolates you not to hurt you, but to shape you, to remove what no longer serves your divine purpose. We often hold on tightly to the familiar, even when it no longer fits who we are becoming. We cling to friendships, routines, and identities that feel safe, even when they keep us stagnant. But growth requires space, and sometimes that space can only be created through isolation. God pulls you away from the crowd so that you may hear Him more clearly. He strips away distractions so that your vision may be renewed. You may not understand it now, but trust that this season of solitude is not a prison. It is a sacred workshop where your soul is being refined. Most people fear isolation because they associate it with loneliness. But loneliness is the absence of people, while solitude is the presence of God. When everything is stripped away, you are left with only one thing, the truth. The truth of who you are, the truth of who God is, and the truth of what is meant for you. In the stillness, you begin to realize that the life you once lived was too small for the person you are becoming. Your dreams were too limited. Your perspective was too narrow. And so God had to remove the old framework to make room for something far greater. Think of the caterpillar before it becomes a butterfly. It does not transform in the presence of others. It does not become its truest self while clinging to the branches it once knew. Instead, it must enter the cocoon. Alone, in this sacred solitude, its old form dissolves. It is no longer what it once was, and yet it is not yet what it will become. This in-between space, this mystery of transformation, is where God does His most miraculous work. The caterpillar does not resist, it surrenders, and in time it emerges with wings. Your isolation is not your ending, it is your cocoon. It is the place where your past dissolves and your future is born. It may feel uncertain, even uncomfortable, but trust that this is exactly where you are meant to be. God has removed certain people from your life for a reason. He has closed doors that no longer align with your purpose. He has led you into solitude because there are lessons that can only be learned in silence, strength that can only be forged in stillness, and wisdom that can only be revealed when you are no longer distracted by the world. One day you will look back and understand. You will see that every moment of isolation was orchestrated to prepare you for something beyond your imagination. The friendships you lost were making way for deeper, truer connections. The doors that closed were redirecting you towards something far greater. The stillness you resisted was the very thing that allowed you to hear God's voice, For now, embrace the solitude. Let it refine you. Let it transform you. Trust that you are not being abandoned, you are being prepared. And when the time is right, when your spirit is ready, the blessing will come. And you will know with unshakable certainty that God isolated you for a reason. There is something profound about the way God works. He does not always announce his plans with grand signs or loud declarations. Instead, he moves in silence, in stillness, in the unseen. And often, before he pours out extraordinary blessings, he first leads you into isolation. It feels counterintuitive. Why would God take things away before giving you something greater? Why does the road to abundance begin with emptiness? These are the questions that arise when you find yourself in a season where everything and everyone seems to disappear. You may feel abandoned, forgotten, or lost. But what if this isolation is not rejection, but redirection? What if God is pulling you away, not to harm you, but to prepare you? Isolation has a way of making you confront what you've been avoiding. When you are constantly surrounded by people, by noise, by distractions, it is easy to ignore the deeper parts of yourself, the parts that need healing, the parts that need clarity. But when everything is stripped away, you have no choice but to face what is real. This is why God allows certain people to leave. This is why doors close without warning. This is why plans fall apart. It is not because you are being punished. It is because you are being positioned for something greater, something beyond what you can currently see. Consider how many times in Scripture God called someone into solitude before elevating them. Moses spent years in the wilderness before he was ready to lead. Joseph was thrown into a pit and left in a prison before he reached the palace. Even Jesus himself retreated into the desert for 40 days before stepping fully into his purpose. Isolation is a pattern, a divine strategy. It is not an accident. It is a necessary process, but most people resist it. They fight against the stillness, searching for ways to fill the empty space. They rush to replace what was lost instead of allowing God to bring something new. They seek comfort in familiarity rather than trusting that something greater is unfolding. But what if, instead of resisting, you surrendered? What if, instead of trying to force your way out of isolation, you embraced it as an invitation to grow, to heal, to listen, an invitation to become the person God is calling you to be? The truth is, not everyone can go where God is taking you. Some relationships are meant for a season, not a lifetime. Some environments can no longer support the person you are becoming. If God is removing people from your life, trust that He sees what you cannot. He hears conversations you were not meant to hear. He knows the intentions of hearts that you cannot discern. So when someone leaves, do not chase after them. When a door closes, do not try to force it open. Instead, trust that God is making space for something far greater. Isolation is a refining fire. It is where God purifies your heart, strengthens your faith, and deepens your wisdom. It is where He teaches you to rely on Him alone. Because when everything is taken away and God is all you have left, you come to realize that He was all you ever needed. You begin to understand that the things you once thought were essential, the approval of others, the plans you carefully crafted, the things you lost, were never your true source of security. God was, and He always will be. One day this season of isolation will make perfect sense. You will look back and see how every moment of solitude prepared you for what was coming. The connections you lost were replaced with people who truly align with your purpose. The delays you resented were actually divine protection. The stillness you resisted was the very thing that allowed you to receive the clarity you needed. So do not fear the isolation. Do not fight against it. Embrace it. Let it transform you. Let it make you stronger, wiser, and more aligned with God's purpose. Because when the time is right, when your heart is ready, the blessings will come, and they will be greater than anything you ever imagined. There is a moment in life when everything familiar begins to slip away. The people you once relied on start to drift, the opportunities you thought were certain begin to vanish, and the plans you carefully made no longer seem to fit. It is in these moments that doubt creeps in. You wonder if you have done something wrong, if you are being punished, if God has forgotten you. But what if this season of isolation is not a curse, but a calling? What if this is not the end of something, but the necessary beginning of something greater? God isolates you for a reason, and that reason is preparation. Before He blesses you, before He elevates you, before He brings the breakthrough you have been waiting for, He first takes you through a process of refinement. This process often looks like loss, like loneliness, like confusion, but beneath the surface something powerful is happening. You are being stripped of what no longer serves you. You are being removed from environments that would limit your growth. You are being given space to listen, to heal, to be molded into the person you need to become for the blessing that is coming. We often think of isolation as a time of emptiness, but in reality it is a time of transformation. Consider how nature teaches us this truth. A seed does not grow in the open air. It must first be buried beneath the soil, hidden away from the world. In the darkness, where no one can see, it begins to break apart. The outer shell that once defined it must be shed so that the new life within can emerge. It is only after this unseen process that the seed pushes through the soil and reaches toward the light. Your isolation is no different. You may feel buried, forgotten, unseen, but beneath the surface, God is doing something that will soon be revealed. One of the greatest mistakes people make is trying to escape the process too soon. When the discomfort of isolation sets in, the temptation is to fill the emptiness with distractions, to return to what is familiar, to rush ahead instead of waiting for God's perfect timing. But growth cannot be rushed. If you take a cake out of the oven before it is fully baked, it will collapse. If you pull a butterfly from its cocoon before it is ready, it will never fly. There is a purpose in the waiting. There is a reason for the stillness. Do not try to force your way out of what God is using to prepare you. God isolates you because He needs your attention. When life is full of noise, it is difficult to hear His voice. But in the quiet, when the distractions are removed, He can reveal things you would not have noticed otherwise. He can speak to your heart in a way that changes everything. This is why He calls people into solitude before their greatest breakthroughs. Moses was alone in the wilderness before he led a nation. David was tending sheep in isolation before he became king. Even Jesus spent time in the desert before stepping into His full ministry. Isolation is not a punishment. It is a preparation ground. There is something beautiful about this process when you learn to trust it. The moment you stop fighting it, the moment you surrender and allow God to do His work, is the moment transformation begins. Instead of fearing isolation, embrace it. Use this time to grow, to strengthen your faith, to prepare for what is coming. Because when God finally releases you, when He opens the doors, when He brings the blessing, you will see that every moment of isolation was necessary. The things you lost were never meant to stay. The people who left were never part of your destiny. The delays were not denials, but divine alignments. So do not lose heart. This is not the end of your story. This is the beginning of something extraordinary. One day you will look back and see how every lonely moment, every unanswered question, every painful season was leading you to a place of greater purpose, greater strength, and greater blessing. God isolates you for a reason, and when the time is right, He will reveal exactly what that reason was. There is a divine mystery in the way God works, a rhythm to His timing that is beyond human understanding. When God is about to do something great in your life, He often begins with something that looks like loss. People walk away, plans fall apart, doors that once seemed wide open suddenly slam shut. It feels as though the very foundation you were standing on is crumbling beneath your feet. And yet, if you look closely, you will see that what feels like destruction is actually preparation. God is isolating you not to harm you, but to prepare you for something beyond what you can imagine. We resist isolation because we associate it with loneliness. We believe that being alone means being forgotten. But what if God is not removing you from people, but rather removing people from you? What if He is not closing doors to punish you, but to protect you from walking into something that would diminish you? We may not see the full picture, but God does. He knows who is meant to walk with you and who will only hold you back. He knows which opportunities are blessings and which ones are disguised distractions. If God is pulling you away, it is not rejection, it is redirection. Consider how transformation happens in nature. Before a diamond is formed, it must endure intense pressure beneath the earth's surface. Before gold is purified, it must pass through fire. Before an eagle learns to fly, the mother will push it out of the nest, forcing it to rely on its wings. In each case, the process is uncomfortable, even painful, but it is necessary for growth. If the pressure never came, the diamond would remain just another rock. If the fire never refined the gold, it would never shine. If the eagle was never forced from the nest, it would never soar. In the same way, God isolates you because He knows that where He is taking you requires strength, faith, and wisdom that can only be developed in solitude. The mistake many people make is trying to escape isolation too soon. The discomfort makes them restless. They try to reconnect with people God removed. They chase after opportunities that were never meant for them. They force doors open instead of waiting for God to open the right ones. But every time you rush the process, you delay the blessing. Just as a seed must remain buried before it can break through the soil, you must allow this season of isolation to do its work. You may not understand it now, but one day you will see that this time alone was the foundation upon which your next season was built. God is not just preparing the blessing for you, He is preparing you for the blessing. There are things within you that need to be strengthened, wounds that need to be healed, mindsets that need to be shifted. If God gave you everything you were praying for right now, could you handle it? Could you sustain it? Would it build you up or would it overwhelm you? God's timing is always perfect, even when it doesn't make sense. Trust that if He has placed you in a season of isolation, He has done so with purpose. This is not the end. This is not punishment. This is preparation. One day when you look back, you will see how every lonely night, every unanswered question, and every moment of stillness was leading you somewhere greater. The relationships that ended were making space for something more meaningful. The doors that closed were protecting you from something that wasn't meant for you. The waiting was developing the patience and wisdom you would need for the next level. Do not rush out of this season. Do not fight the stillness. Lean into it. Learn from it. Let it shape you. Because when God finally opens the door, when He finally releases the blessing, you will not just be ready, you will be transformed. And then everything will make sense. There is a moment in every person's journey when life suddenly becomes quiet. The people who once surrounded you are no longer there. The plans you once depended on begin to unravel, and the certainty you once felt is replaced with deep uncertainty. It is in this silence that many begin to question everything. Why is this happening? Has God forgotten me? But what if this silence is not abandonment, but a sacred invitation? What if God is not punishing you, but preparing you for something extraordinary? God isolates you for a reason, not to break you, but to build you, not to remove you from the world, but to reshape you for something greater. Too often we become comfortable in environments that were never meant to sustain us. We attach ourselves to people who no longer serve our growth, remain in places that limit our potential, and cling to old versions of ourselves that no longer align with who we are meant to be. And so in His divine wisdom, God begins to remove these things. He leads you away from what is familiar, stripping away the noise, forcing you into stillness. It may feel like loss, but it is actually love. It is the love of a Creator who sees beyond what you can see, who knows what you need before you even realize it yourself. Think about a sculptor who begins with a rough, unshaped piece of stone. Before the masterpiece can be revealed, the excess must be carved away. The process is not gentle. It is a series of strikes, of removals, of breaking away the unnecessary to uncover the beauty within. The stone does not understand why it is being chipped, why pieces of it are falling to the ground. But the sculptor sees what the stone cannot, the vision of what it is meant to become. In the same way, when God isolates you, He is removing everything that is not aligned with your purpose. He is cutting away distractions, unhealthy attachments, and limiting beliefs so that you may step fully into the person He created you to be. The mistake most people make is resisting this process. The discomfort of isolation makes them restless. They try to force doors open that were meant to stay closed. They chase after relationships that God has already removed. They seek distractions to fill the silence instead of embracing the lessons hidden within it. But every time you resist, you delay your transformation. Every time you fight against the solitude, you miss the opportunity to grow. Instead of fearing isolation, what if you embraced it? What if instead of trying to escape it, you surrendered to it? Some of the greatest figures in history experienced profound isolation before stepping into their calling. Moses spent years in the wilderness before leading his people. Joseph was betrayed, imprisoned, and forgotten before he was elevated to a position of power. Even Jesus withdrew into solitude before beginning his ministry. Isolation is not a sign that you are lost. It is a sign that you are being prepared. One day you will understand why this season was necessary. You will look back and see how every person who left, every door that closed, and every painful moment of solitude was orchestrated with divine precision. You'll realize that if God had given you what you wanted too soon, you would not have been ready to sustain it. You needed this time. You needed this process. You needed to be alone so that you could finally hear the voice of God without distraction, without interference. Do not resist what is meant to transform you. Let this season shape you. Let it strengthen you. Trust that when God isolates you, it is not to harm you, but to prepare you for the blessings that are already on their way. And when those blessings come, you will finally understand why the isolation had to come first. You know, there comes a moment in life, quiet, subtle, when you are not just physically tired, but soul tired. Not the kind of fatigue that sleep can fix, but something deeper. A spiritual exhaustion, as if you've been swimming against the current for too long. And yet, in that silence, something watches, something listens. God, the eternal, the unseen, is not distant. No, He is intimately aware of your weariness. Not a single sigh escapes His notice. But here is the paradox when you are at your most tired. What is required is not more effort, but less. Not striving, but surrender. And that, my friend, is where it all begins. Pray. Wait. Trust. You see, there's a kind of tiredness that goes far beyond what sleep or a vacation can fix. It's not the kind of fatigue that a cup of coffee or a day off will solve. It is something much deeper, quieter, and often harder to name. It is the exhaustion of the soul. A tiredness that lives under the surface of your skin, behind your eyes, and deep within your spirit. You may go about your day with a smile, doing what needs to be done, saying what needs to be said, but inside, you feel stretched thin, like a thread about to snap. And the strange thing is, most people won't see it. They won't notice, because exhaustion of this kind often wears a disguise. It looks like strength, like responsibility, like being the dependable one. But you know the truth. Inside, you're tired. And not just tired, you're worn out. We live in a world that constantly tells you to go, to strive, to push harder, to never stop. And so, many of us carry burdens that were never meant to be carried alone. The expectations, the silent battles, the disappointments that accumulate slowly over time. The fear that maybe we're falling behind. That maybe we're not enough. And in the middle of it all, we get tired. Not just because of the effort, but because of the feeling that it might all be for nothing. That perhaps the path we're walking is leading nowhere. That perhaps God is silent. That perhaps no one really sees what we're going through. But I want to tell you something that may sound simple. Yet it is profoundly true. God knows. He knows. He sees the weariness you don't speak of. He sees the way you keep showing up, even when you have nothing left to give. He sees the tears that don't fall, the ones you've learned to hold back so you can keep moving forward. He sees the long nights where your thoughts run wild and your prayers feel unanswered. He knows. And more than that, he understands. This is not a distant God who watches from the heavens, indifferent to human pain. This is a God who walked among us, who wept, who bled, who felt the weight of human sorrow. And so when he sees your exhaustion, he does not shame you for it. He does not say, "Get it together." He whispers, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest," not judgment, not more demands. Rest. But here's the part we often forget. Acknowledging our exhaustion is not a weakness. In fact, it's a kind of sacred honesty. To say, "I am tired," is not to admit defeat. It's to speak truth. And truth is where God meets us. Not in the masks we wear, not in the performances we give, but in the raw, unfiltered reality of our inner world. It is there, in that place of openness, that he begins to minister to us, to restore, to renew. There's a strange beauty in reaching the end of ourselves. Because when we are no longer able to rely on our own strength, we begin to make space for something greater. When our hands are too weak to keep holding everything together, we finally release what we were never meant to control. And in that letting go, in that sacred unraveling, we find that God has been holding us all along. So maybe today you don't need another motivational push. Maybe you don't need another "keep going" or "stay strong." Maybe what you need is permission to rest, to breathe, to be human, and to believe even in your weariness that you are not forgotten, that you are not a failure for feeling tired, that your tiredness is not a sign of weakness, but a sign that you have been carrying something heavy for far too long. Maybe what you need most is not a solution, but presence. Not immediate answers, but assurance. The assurance that God is near, even when you feel far. That he is for you, even when everything seems against you. That he loves you, not because you're productive or positive or perfect, but because you are his. Simply that, you are his. And maybe, just maybe, the very moment you feel like giving up is the moment heaven is closest to you. Because it is often in those quiet, broken spaces that the most profound transformation begins. Not in the rush, not in the noise, but in the stillness that comes when we finally say, "God, I'm tired. Help me." This is not the end. It is a beginning born not out of strength, but of surrender. A beginning that invites you to stop striving and start trusting, to stop pretending and start praying, and to believe that even in your most tired state, you are seen, known, and deeply loved. You may not always hear him, and you may not always feel him, but let me assure you, God sees you. He is not blind to your pain, nor deaf to your silence. There's a mystery in how the divine observes us, not from a distance like some faraway judge, but intimately, as though he is sitting quietly in the very room where you ache. In moments when you can barely lift your head or form the words to pray, he is already aware. The tears you wipe away quickly before anyone notices, the heavy sighs in the quiet of the night, the effort it takes just to get through the day, none of it is lost on him. You don't need to shout to get God's attention. You don't need grand gestures or poetic prayers. Your very existence is heard. Your very breath is a prayer. He knows the story behind every silence, every pause, every glance you cast toward heaven when you don't know what else to say. You are not invisible. You've never been. You are not unseen, not by the one who fashioned you in the womb, who numbered every hair on your head, who knows your thoughts before you think them, who understands the language of your soul before your mouth ever speaks. Sometimes we imagine God to be like people, impatient, distracted, needing reminders that we are struggling. But God doesn't forget you just because you're quiet. He doesn't withdraw his love because you're not as faithful as you think you should be. On the contrary, His gaze is fixed on you all the more when you're struggling to hold on. He is not just present when your faith is strong, when your voice is confident, or when your spirit is joyful. He is present in the moments of doubt, in the quiet battles, in the times when you are barely holding yourself together. It's one thing to know that God exists. It's something far deeper to know that He sees. That in a world of billions, your particular pain, your individual journey, your unique trials matter to Him. Not in a vague or generalized way, but intimately, deeply, personally. That is the love of God. He doesn't just love humanity. He loves you. He doesn't just see the collective suffering of the world. He sees your weariness, your confusion, your heartbreak, your hope. And He is not passively observing. He is not merely noting down your struggles like some distant observer writing in a book. He is moved by compassion. He is with you. The Scriptures do not say that God watches us from afar. They say that He draws near to the brokenhearted, that He is a refuge and a shelter, that He is an ever-present help in times of trouble. Ever present. What a phrase! It means He is here right now as you read this, not waiting for you to improve, not waiting for you to get back to some imagined spiritual standard. Right now, in your tiredness and uncertainty, He is near. Perhaps this is the greatest misunderstanding so many carry, that God only shows up when we are at our best. But what if the opposite is true? What if the very place where you feel most broken is the place where God is building something sacred? What if your weariness is not a barrier to His presence, but an invitation to lean deeper into it? In the stillness, in the moments where nothing seems to be changing, when prayers feel unanswered and direction feels absent, God is still watching, still guiding. Sometimes, what we perceive as divine silence is actually God doing His most important work. The roots grow deep in winter, unseen. The healing takes place beneath the surface, before it ever shows outwardly. So even though you may feel like you're in the middle of a void, know this: God is not far. You are not forgotten. He is the God who saw Hagar in the wilderness, alone and afraid, and called Himself El Roi, the God who sees me. He saw her running, He saw her crying, and He gave her a promise. And that same God sees you, not as a project to fix, not as a disappointment to manage, but as His child, precious, worthy of love, worthy of His time and attention. This is where trust begins, not in the certainty of outcomes, but in the certainty of being seen. When you know that you are fully visible to God, you stop needing to perform for Him. You stop needing to impress heaven with your strength. You can simply be. And being is enough. Your presence, your breath, your heart that still beats even when it's heavy, that is enough. So when you feel invisible in this world, overlooked, unheard, pushed to the background, remember that you are never invisible to Him. The world may not know your story, but God does. The world may not honor your silent battles, but God does. The world may not notice the nights you spend praying for answers, the days you keep going without applause, but He notices. He holds those moments like treasure. You are not unseen. You are seen fully, completely, and with more love than your mind can fathom. And when you truly understand that you are seen by God, it changes everything. It doesn't always change the circumstances, but it changes you. It gives you the courage to keep walking even when the path is unclear. It gives you peace in the midst of storms. It gives you strength, not because the burden disappears, but because you know you are not carrying it alone. You are walking in the presence of the One who sees it all, understands it all, and never turns away. So don't be afraid to be honest with God. Don't be afraid to let Him see your weakness. He already does, and still He chooses to stay. Always. Prayer is often misunderstood. Many approach it as a transaction. Ask and receive, speak and be answered. But real prayer, the kind that touches eternity, is not about saying the right words or impressing God with eloquence. It's not about formulas or rituals. It's about presence, stillness, connection. Prayer in its truest form is not something you perform. It's something you enter. It's not merely talking to God. It's being with God. It's the sacred silence of the heart turned toward the divine, even when there are no words left to say. There are moments in life when you don't even know what to pray for. The pain is too great, the confusion too thick, and your soul too tired to form a coherent thought. And in those moments, you might wonder if your silence disappoints God. You might believe that your lack of words means you've failed at faith. But nothing could be further from the truth, because God is not measuring your spiritual life by the length of your prayers. He is not checking off how many verses you've quoted or how long you've knelt. He is looking at your heart. And sometimes the most powerful prayer is the one you never speak out loud. It's the tear sliding down your cheek. It's the sigh you let out when you think no one's listening. It's the simple turning of your soul in God's direction, even if you don't have the strength to move your lips. There's a sacredness in that kind of prayer. The kind born not out of habit or obligation, but out of deep need, deep hunger. When you pray from a place of desperation, not to manipulate God, but to be near Him, you are stepping into a space of profound intimacy. You are saying, without words, God, I'm here. I don't have answers. I don't even know what I need. But I know I need you. And that, right there, is enough. We've been taught to speak when we pray, but we often forget to listen. We speak and then walk away, wondering why we don't hear anything in return. But what if prayer isn't a speech to heaven, but a conversation? What if it's not about filling the space with noise, but learning to be comfortable in the quiet? God often whispers. He speaks in stillness. He moves not with flashes of lightning, but with the gentle nudges of peace, with the quiet reminders that you are not alone. In a world obsessed with speed and productivity, we forget how to be still. We treat prayer like another task to check off, another spiritual duty to complete. But God isn't calling you to hustle your way into His presence. He's inviting you to come as you are, not polished, not prepared, just present. That's all He asks, that you show up. That you bring your honest self without pretending, without performance. Prayer is not about becoming someone else. It's about revealing who you truly are and trusting that even in your rawest state, you are deeply loved. There is no wrong way to pray when the heart is sincere. Whether your words are poetic or broken, whether you pray out loud or in the silence of your mind, God hears. He hears the whisper beneath your thoughts. He hears the longing behind your confusion. And most of all, He hears the faith it takes just to turn to Him when you feel empty. That act alone, the act of turning toward Him, however weakly, is prayer, and it is powerful. It's important to remember that prayer is not a magic formula to control God's hand. It's not a guarantee that your circumstances will instantly change. But it is the open door to relationship. It's the sacred space where you let God into your pain, your uncertainty, your questions. And in that space, He doesn't always give answers. Sometimes He gives something even more profound Himself. His presence, His peace, His quiet reassurance that even if everything around you is shifting, He is steady, unmoving, faithful. There's a reason we're told to pray continually. It's not because God needs constant updates on our life. It's because we need constant reminders that we are not alone. Prayer aligns our hearts with God's heart. It recenters us when the world pulls us in every direction. It reminds us that there is something greater than what we see, that there is a plan unfolding even when we don't understand it. And most of all, it reminds us that we are deeply known and deeply loved. So if you're tired and your prayers have become quiet, don't be discouraged. The most honest prayers are often the simplest. Help me? Be near. I don't know what to do. These are enough. They are real. They are raw. And they are more powerful than 1,000 scripted lines. God is not moved by performance. He is moved by honesty. He leans in when you stop trying to be perfect and simply come to Him as you are. Let prayer become your resting place, not your responsibility. Let it be the place where you lay down your burdens, not pick up new ones. Let it be where you return again and again, not to change God, but to be changed by Him, because in that sacred space where your soul meets His presence, something begins to shift. Not always outside you, but within you. Peace begins to grow where there was anxiety. Hope rises where there was despair. And strength slowly returns, not the strength of striving, but the strength of being held, That is the quiet power of prayer. Not that it always fixes the storm, but that it reminds you who is in the boat with you. And that, my friend, makes all the difference. So much of our exhaustion, our worry, our anxiety, comes from this desperate attempt to hold everything together, to be in control, to make sense of every outcome, every decision, every twist in the road. We live with the belief, often unspoken but deeply rooted, that if we just try hard enough, think long enough, plan thoroughly enough, we can keep the pieces of our lives from falling apart, that we can somehow guard ourselves from disappointment, heartbreak, or failure. And so we tighten our grip. We try to manage the uncontrollable. We become the puppet master of 1,000 invisible strings, trying to pull them all just right. But life doesn't bend to our will. Circumstances shift. People change. Doors close unexpectedly. The future unfolds in ways we never could have predicted. And no matter how much we plan or prepare, there will always be moments where we feel completely out of our depth. And that's where the real weariness sets in, not from the actual work of life, but from the illusion that we're supposed to be in charge of it all. This illusion of control is exhausting. It's heavy. It demands that we live in a constant state of alertness, always anticipating what could go wrong, always bracing ourselves for what might not go our way. It convinces us that if we stop striving, everything will fall apart. That if we don't have the answers, then we're failing. But the truth, the liberating, deeply spiritual truth, is this: we were never meant to carry that weight. We were never meant to be the architects of every outcome. We are not God. There is a kind of peace that only comes when we finally acknowledge our limits. When we say, I don't know what's next. I don't have all the answers. And that's okay. It's not giving up, it's giving in. It's surrendering not in defeat, but in trust. Trust that there is a wisdom greater than ours at work. Trust that life, while unpredictable, is not meaningless. Trust that God is still writing the story, even when the pages feel blank, when we let go of the need to control everything. We make space for something far more powerful to enter grace. We begin to live in rhythm with something beyond ourselves. We stop fighting the current and start flowing with it. We stop trying to force doors open and start noticing the ones that God quietly opens for us. We stop clinging to our own plans and start asking, what are you doing here, God? And how can I be part of it? Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean you stop showing up. It means you stop believing the lie that everything rests on your shoulders. It means you stop treating life as a problem to solve and start seeing it as a journey to experience. You begin to realize that control was never the goal. Peace was. And peace doesn't come from holding tighter. It comes from releasing your grip. One of the most spiritual things you can do is exhale. Truly exhale. To breathe out the tension, the fear, the pressure. To say, God, I can't carry this anymore, and I don't have to. That is not weakness. That is wisdom. That is maturity. That is what trust looks like. We often think that surrender means things will get worse, that everything will spiral out of control if we don't manage it. But surrender is not the same as chaos. In fact, true surrender often leads to clarity. When you stop trying to control outcomes, your vision becomes clearer. You begin to see what actually matters. You begin to hear the still, small voice that's been drowned out by your own inner noise. You begin to find direction, not through overthinking, but through quiet awareness. God does not ask you to understand everything. He asks you to trust Him through everything. And that trust doesn't have to be loud or confident. It can be quiet, fragile. It can simply be the decision to rest, even when the path ahead is unclear. That choice alone, to rest in the middle of uncertainty, is an act of faith more powerful than 1,000 words. There is a reason Jesus said, "Take my yoke upon you, for my burden is light." He wasn't saying that life would be easy. He was saying that with Him, the burden becomes bearable. Because He is carrying it with you. You are not meant to figure it all out. You are meant to walk in step with the One who already knows the way. And sometimes, walking in step means stopping, resting, waiting. Not pushing harder, but being still enough to hear His voice again, to feel His presence again. to remember that He is God and you are not. That's not an insult to your strength. That's an invitation to live free. So when the weight gets heavy and the path gets unclear, ask yourself gently, what am I trying to control that was never mine to carry? Where am I exhausting myself trying to make something happen that only God can do? And can I, even just for a moment, loosen my grip? Let go. Not because everything is okay, but because holding on is making you sick. Let go. Not because you've lost faith, but because you've finally found it. Faith that trusts in God's plan more than your own. Faith that says, even here, even now, I believe you are working. Even when I don't understand. And in that release, something beautiful happens. You start to feel light again. Not because your situation has changed, but because your soul has. Because you've remembered the truth that sets you free. You were never meant to be in control. You were meant to trust the one who is. Waiting is not easy. In fact, it might be one of the hardest things we ever have to do. Especially when we're waiting on God. When we've prayed, when we've cried, when we've laid everything at His feet, and still, silence. Still, no change. Still, nothing that looks like progress. It's in these moments that the heart starts to grow restless. Doubts begin to creep in. We start wondering if we've been forgotten. If maybe we misunderstood or were simply mistaken in our faith. Waiting feels like standing still while the world moves on around you. It can feel lonely, frustrating, and even painful. But waiting is not wasting. Just because nothing seems to be happening doesn't mean God isn't working. Some of the most important things God does in your life happen in the waiting. You may not see it with your eyes, you may not feel it in your emotions, but something deep, quiet, and lasting is being formed inside you. Waiting is where roots grow deep. Waiting is where character is shaped, where faith is purified, and where your heart is prepared for what's coming next. We live in a culture obsessed with immediacy. Fast food, instant downloads, overnight delivery. We've been conditioned to expect quick results and instant gratification. But God doesn't operate on our timeline. He is not in a rush. And that can be maddening when we're desperate for resolution. But the truth is, God's timing is not slow, it's perfect. He sees what you cannot see. He knows what you cannot know. And sometimes, what feels like a delay is actually divine protection. What feels like a setback is actually setting the stage for something greater. There's a reason the Bible says, "They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength." Not they that run, not they that strive, not they that control. They that wait. Waiting is not passive. It's not doing nothing. It's choosing to stay grounded in faith, even when everything in you wants to rush ahead. It's trusting the process. It's standing still while God moves on your behalf. In the waiting, your trust is tested. You begin to ask, do I trust God's plan even when it doesn't match my own? Do I trust His silence as much as I trust His voice? Can I believe that He's doing something even now, even when I can't feel it? That kind of trust doesn't come easily. It's forged in the fire of delay, in the long nights and the empty spaces. It's born when you learn to lean, not on your own understanding, but on something higher, wiser, and eternal. Sometimes we want the blessing, but we're not ready for it. Sometimes God has to grow us before He gives to us. If He gave us what we asked for too soon, we might mishandle it. We might not have the strength, the wisdom, or the humility to carry it well. So in His mercy He waits, not to punish us, but to prepare us, not to withhold from us, but to deepen us. Because what God wants to give you is not just a moment of satisfaction, but a life of significance. And that kind of life takes time. Think of the seed buried in the ground. It looks like nothing is happening. It's hidden, unseen. But under the surface, transformation is taking place. Roots are growing, foundations are forming. And when the time is right, it breaks through the soil, not because it was rushed, but because it was ready. That is what waiting on God looks like. You are the seed. And though it feels like darkness now, there is growth happening that you cannot yet see. You may be tempted to give up in the waiting, to settle for something less, to take matters into your own hands. But don't trade the greatness God is preparing for the convenience of now. Don't sabotage your own promise just because patience is hard. Stay where you are planted. Trust that the same God who began a good work in you will carry it to completion. In His time, not yours. And when the waiting gets long, don't isolate. Don't silence your heart. Talk to God. Pour out your doubts. Be honest. He can handle it. Prayer doesn't have to be perfect to be powerful. Even a frustrated, "God, I don't understand," is still a prayer. And in those raw, vulnerable moments, you'll begin to hear something subtle and real, the whisper of a God who is still near, still watching, still writing your story. There's a strength that grows only in stillness. There's a faith that is built only in delay. There's a trust that is born only when you've run out of your own answers and are forced to lean into His. And that trust, that unshakable belief that God is good even when life doesn't feel good, that is what will carry you forward. Not your strength, not your plans, not your control, but your surrender. So take heart. If you're in a season of waiting, you are not being punished. You are being prepared. You are not forgotten. You are being formed. And when the time is right, what God has planned will be more beautiful than anything you could have forced into being on your own. He is never late. He is never early. He is always, always right on time. And until that time comes, wait with hope. Wait with trust. Wait with expectation. Because the God who makes you wait is the same God who will make it worth it. Trust is one of those quiet words we hear often, but rarely sit with long enough to feel its depth. It's not loud. It doesn't demand attention. But it's powerful, so powerful, in fact, that your entire relationship with God hinges on it. Trust is not simply believing that God exists. It's believing that He is good, that He is for you. That even when life doesn't make sense, even when the doors don't open and the prayers seem unanswered, He's still working things together for your good. But let's be honest, trusting God is not always easy. It's beautiful in theory, but incredibly difficult in the raw places of life. When the healing doesn't come, when the job falls through, when the people you counted on walk away, that's when trust becomes more than a nice word. It becomes a decision, a daily decision. To believe that God's silence doesn't mean absence, that His timing isn't cruel, that even when you feel forgotten, you are held in the palm of His hand. You see, trust begins where understanding ends. We all want clarity. We want to know why things happen, when they'll get better, and how it's all going to work out. But God rarely hands us a roadmap. Instead, He invites us to take the next step, without all the answers. That's hard, because deep down we think trust means certainty. We think if we trust God, then life should be smooth. But real trust is not about the absence of storms. It's about finding peace in the middle of them. God isn't asking you to understand everything right now. He's not demanding that you have it all figured out. He's simply asking you to trust that He does, that He sees the entire picture while you only see a piece. Imagine looking at a single puzzle piece, awkward, irregular, confusing. If you didn't know it was part of something larger, you'd think it was meaningless. But once it's placed in the full image, it makes sense. That's how life is. Right now you're holding a single piece, and it might not make sense. But trust says, God, I believe you're putting the whole picture together. And even if I don't see it yet, I know you're doing something good. Trust is not about pretending everything is fine. It's not about forcing a smile or reciting verses to avoid dealing with pain. No, trust is gritty. It's raw. It's saying, God, I'm scared, I'm confused, I'm tired, but I still believe you are who you say you are. That's what faith looks like in real life. Not perfection, not certainty, just a heart that chooses to lean, even when it would be easier to run. Think of Abraham, who was told to leave everything he knew and go to a place God would show him. Not a map, not coordinates, just a promise. Think of Joseph, sold by his brothers, imprisoned unfairly, forgotten by people he helped. Yet God used every moment to position him for something greater. Think of Mary, a young girl told she would carry the Son of God without fully knowing the cost. Over and over, Scripture shows us that trust is not about understanding the plan. but about knowing the one who made the promise. And here's something else to remember. God doesn't just want you to trust Him with the big things, your calling, your future, your breakthrough. He wants you to trust Him in the small things too, with your emotions, your daily routine, your relationships, your disappointments. The things you think are too trivial for prayer are often the very areas where trust is formed. Because trust isn't built in the mountaintop moments, it's forged in the quiet valleys, in the questions, in the waiting rooms of life, in the times when all you have is a whisper and a choice to believe that God is still with you. Trust doesn't eliminate fear, but it quiets it. Trust doesn't remove uncertainty, but it changes your posture in the middle of it. You stop grasping for control and begin to open your hands. You stop demanding answers and start seeking presence. You begin to say things like, "Even if I don't get what I asked for, I know you haven't abandoned me." That kind of trust transforms your entire perspective. It doesn't always change your situation, but it always changes you. The truth is, we often measure God's goodness by how comfortable our lives are. But God is not just concerned with comfort. He's committed to growth. And growth often happens through tension, through pressure, through surrender. Trust is what turns pain into purpose. It's what allows God to use even the broken parts of your story for beauty. Because nothing is wasted. Not your tears, not your waiting, not your confusion. God collects it all, and He weaves it into something far greater than you could imagine. So today, wherever you find yourself, whether on a mountain, in a valley, or somewhere in between, ask yourself, can I let go of the need to understand and choose to trust instead? Can I trust that God knows what He's doing, even when I don't? Can I believe that His plan is still good, even when life feels hard? The answer doesn't have to be loud. You don't need perfect faith, you just need a willing heart, a heart that says, "God, I trust you, not because I see the way, but because I know who you are." And that's enough. That's more than enough. Because in the end, trust is not about having control. It's about resting in the arms of the one who does. There's something sacred about stillness, something deeply spiritual about moments when you stop striving, stop rushing, stop trying to fix everything, and simply be. But stillness is hard, especially in a world that prizes hustle and productivity, that measures your worth by what you do, how fast you achieve, how much you can produce. We've been taught that being still is lazy, that resting is weakness, that if you're not moving forward, you're falling behind. So we resist stillness. We fill the silence. We busy ourselves, even when we're exhausted, just to prove to ourselves and others that we're still in control. But God speaks in the stillness. He always has. From the beginning, His voice hovered over the waters before the world was shaped. When Elijah stood waiting on a word from the Lord, it didn't come through wind or earthquake or fire. It came through a still, small voice. Not a shout, a whisper. And the thing about a whisper is, you have to be quiet to hear it. You have to stop. You have to listen. Stillness is not the absence of activity, it's the presence of peace. It's not about doing nothing, it's about doing the inner work of trust, of surrender, of aligning your heart with God's pace, not your own. Stillness is a posture of faith. It says, I don't have to force the outcome. I don't have to rush the process. I don't have to be the answer to every problem. I can rest because I know God is still at work, even when I am not. This is what makes stillness so counterintuitive. Everything in us wants to move when things go wrong. We want to fix. We want to solve. We want to act. But stillness calls us to pause, to trust that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is wait, to stop striving long enough to recognize that God is not just found in the progress, but in the pause. And here's the mystery. When you stop trying to control everything, peace starts to enter. Slowly at first, like water filling the cracks of a dry riverbed. But it comes. Not because your situation has changed, but because you have. Because you've made space for God's presence to be more than a theory, it becomes a felt reality. In stillness, you start to hear again. You hear the voice that's been drowned out by worry and fear. You hear the quiet assurance that says, you're not alone. I've got this, I've got you. A stillness isn't natural for most of us. It feels risky, vulnerable, because stillness means we're not in control. It means trusting that God is working behind the scenes, even when we can't see it. And trust like that, deep soul-level trust, can only be developed through time spent in quiet with Him, through sitting with the uncomfortable questions, through choosing not to numb yourself with distractions, through learning to be okay with the unknown, not because it's easy, but because you know who holds the future. Sometimes God allows life to slow us down so we can finally hear what we've been too busy to notice. He brings us to still waters, not just to refresh us, but to reset us, to remind us that we were not made to run on empty, to remind us that He is God and we are not. And in that stillness, things become clear again. Priorities realign, peace returns, faith is renewed. You might feel guilty for resting. You might think, there's so much I need to do, so many things I need to fix. But God's invitation to stillness is not an interruption to your life. It is your life. It's where your soul remembers what truly matters. It's where your spirit breathes again. Rest is not optional. It's sacred. It's holy. It's commanded, not as a burden, but as a blessing. Jesus Himself practiced stillness. He withdrew often. He found solitary places to pray, to connect with the Father, to be. If the Son of God needed stillness, how much more do we? We can't pour from an empty cup. We can't lead others to peace if we ourselves are frantic. We can't hear God clearly when we're drowning in noise. And yet, when you make space for stillness,